Good evening. This is Ben Kafferlin, Warren County Commissioner and Director of the GT Commonwealth PAC, and I'll be moderating our discussion this evening along with our founder, Congressman Gt Thompson. Our organization exists to promote God's gifts. We support policy and candidates who are pro-life, pro-agriculture, energy, and pro-business. If you'd like to support our efforts, please visit our website at gtpacpa.com. The purpose of the call tonight is to discuss the big problems facing Pennsylvania in light of next Tuesday's primary election. Our special guests include Charlie, candidate for governor, and Jeff Coleman, candidate for lieutenant governor. After some introductions, we would like our guests to offer some initial thoughts on the political landscape and their place in it, and GT is going to ask some key questions. And then we'll open it up for your questions. We should wrap up in about an hour. At any time, if you want to ask a question, just press *3, and we'll take down your information and get you in the queue. You'll get to ask your question to the panelists as time allows. At this time, let me introduce a stalwart conservative statesman, my friend, Congressman Gt Thompson. GT represents the 15th Congressional District, encompassing 1/4 of the landmass of Pennsylvania. He's held since he won his 2008 election. He's served on key committees and caucuses in the U.S. House of Representatives, most notably as ranking member of the Agriculture Committee. He's a Penn State and Temple grad and hails from rural Center County, where he lives with his wife. A true public servant, he's been active in his community for many years as a volunteer firefighter and EMT, and is active in his church and faith. Congressman, thanks for joining us. Please take it away.
All right, Ben, thank you so much. And good evening, everybody. This is Congressman Gt Thompson. And as Ben said, I'm proud to serve the Pennsylvania 15th Congressional District and as Dean of the Pennsylvania Republican Congressional Delegation. With this next election, I actually will go from 1/4 of the landmass to a full 1/3 of the landmass of Pennsylvania, and will become the Dean of the entire Congressional Delegation with Mike Doyle's retirement. Well, tonight's teletown is provided by the GT Commonwealth PAC, or otherwise known as the Greater Tomorrow Commonwealth PAC. Now, the GT Commonwealth PAC is committed to focusing on what makes America great, as Ben outlined. PAC supports Pennsylvania state and local candidates that are pro-life and family, pro-agriculture, pro-energy, and pro-small business. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, as Ben mentioned, all you have to do tonight is press *3 on your telephone keypad, and we'll have folks will help you tee that up. Encourage questions for our two guests tonight. Charlie Giroux and Jeff Coleman. Now, with 9 Republican candidates running in both the governor and lieutenant governor primary, I know that many voters are struggling to come to a decision. And quite frankly, there's a significant number of undecideds with just being a week out. And even those that are decided are, when polled, say with better information, they would be willing to reconsider who their first choice might be. So tonight I'm proud to be joined by my endorsed candidates for Pennsylvania governor and lieutenant governor. And again, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question. On May 17th, the Pennsylvania Republicans will go to the polls and elect our Republican candidates that will run in the November general election. And this election is our opportunity to reverse the damaging policies of Tom Wolf and stop the socialist overspending of his administration, and restore some checks and balances in Washington as well. Pennsylvania's had the opportunity to correct the course of our Commonwealth and the nation, and I respect that each voter will make the best decision based on the information that you have. And that's why we're doing this call tonight, to help you have the best possible information. After much observation and study and prayer, I would have to say, here are my endorsements for this critical election. For Governor, Charlie Giroux, and for Lieutenant Governor, Jeff Coleman. Charlie Giroux for governor. Pennsylvania needs the strongest conservative leadership to restore the Commonwealth to the greatness that Pennsylvania deserves, all Pennsylvanians deserve. Pennsylvanians need a governor who has consistently put purpose above power. That governor will be Charlie Giroux. Charlie is a national conservative leader with deep Pennsylvania roots. Charlie's conservative credentials are unmatched. He serves as the vice chairman of the Conservative Political Action Committee. It's the largest conservative organization in the world, let alone the country, and also the American Conservative Union. Charlie began his career on the campaign staff of Ronald Reagan with for whom he did work for many years, including the arrangements for the president's funeral. That's how high regards that President Reagan and his family held Charlie, and continues to do so today. Charlie was born into poverty in southern Brazil, adopted by American missionaries, and came to the United States and has lived in Pennsylvania for 60 years. And I'm proud to endorse Charlie Giroux for Pennsylvania governor. And Charlie, thanks for joining me tonight. And I'm going to yield the floor to you for some initial comments.
Well, GT, I'm honored to be with you and the folks that are listening in tonight, and with Jeff Coleman. And I'll tell you a little sequel to the story of my adoption that involves the Coleman family. So I'm running for governor, because I got a call from the dean of our congressional delegation who encouraged me. Is that a good way of putting it, GT? Strongly encouraged me to run for governor. And I thought about it, I prayed about it, I talked with my family and friends, and I realized that in this moment of real crisis in our country, where we're in a battle for the heart and soul of this nation, with those battle lines, GT, coming right through Pennsylvania next year, that it was important for me to step up to the plate, because we really have an opportunity to reverse the trend away from the big government, big spending, over-regulating, top-down, big government model of edicts and mandates and arbitrary and capricious actions, which have been the highlight of the last 8 years of Tom Wolf and Josh Shapiro, and turn to a very different direction, one of individual freedom, one of personal liberty, one of individual responsibility, and of hope and growth, economic growth in particular, optimism, and real prosperity for Pennsylvania. And so that's why I'm running, and I'm looking forward to taking my experience as a solid conservative from my days with Ronald Reagan to my current service of CPAC directly to the governor's mansion. But I do want to mention real quickly Jeff Coleman, because the little mission where I was adopted in Brazil was run by missionaries on a mission board, which is today run by Jeff Coleman's dad. And I just think that is God's providence at work in a very remarkable way.
Hey, Charlie, thank you so much. Really excited that you're on the call, and looking forward to some great questions here for us. Again, if you'd like to ask our guest a question this evening, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And now it's my privilege and honor to talk about a man that I've known for many years as well, Jeff Coleman. The Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor needs the experience to bring Pennsylvania together. The only way a governor can advance a legislative agenda is by working with the state, House, and Senate to advance the needs of Pennsylvanians. And the Lieutenant Governor supports our governor, serving as president of the state Senate and maintaining relationships with state House members. Having served in the Pennsylvania State House and working with many candidates, Jeff is well positioned for success in this key position. And he went on to write a book promoting a return to civility, kindness, and honest debate. And the new governor will need a steady, experienced advisor, someone capable of making the case for a reform agenda and building coalitions, because it's the only way that you get things done. If you just slam your fist on the table and really can't bring people together, you're not going to accomplish things. We've seen examples of that in the past. Jeff Coleman is capable of bringing people together and advancing the agenda for our new governor. And I'm honored to endorse his candidacy for Lieutenant Governor. Jeff, I'm honored to have you on our call this evening, and I'll yield the floor to you.
Well, thank you, GT, and what a privilege it is. And let me say it's a privilege for this reason, because both you and Charlie have run campaigns that have been dignified, that have respected the voters, that haven't gone below the belt. And I've been crisscrossing the state. Today in our RV, I was in Johnstown. Now I'm in Cumberland County on our No Drama Conservative tour. And what people are saying is they just don't believe the sincerity of people who are running and serving in these as candidates and then holding public office. They don't believe that these 30-second ads and the negative attacks that are always below the belt represent real opinions. They know they're connected to a consultant, and they know they aren't likely what the real convictions are. And what people would love to hear is, how would you, if you were given the privilege of serving in whatever office you'd hold, how would you approach the job? How would you make decisions? who's in the room with you? How do you think? How do you decide? And the lieutenant governor's job is one of those jobs that's very, very misunderstood. It has a lot to do with the fact that I think most lieutenant governors around the country view this job as either a stepping stone for governor, or they view it as a tool to promote a particular agenda. So you always see lieutenant governors maybe on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN. But the hard work of government and passing a governor's agenda in just 1,640 days is the job of the lieutenant governor. And you cannot have a lieutenant governor that's prone to theatrics or that is a name caller or sarcastic. You've got to have kind of the level-headed, again, no drama, a leader who is able to build coalitions, bring people together, and do it in a respectful way. And I'll just close with this by saying that for those who identify as Christians, as I am, the idea is that because we believe people are made in the image of God, that just by virtue of being a human being, that's why we're pro-life, people deserve dignity and respect. If we just started there with that simple idea, we could debate very difficult topics and ideas, but do it in a way that elevates the process, that loves our neighbor, and makes Pennsylvania a very, very different place to live. So, GT, it's a great privilege to be on with you and Charlie tonight, and I have a lot of hope for politics because of men like you guys.
Well, Jeff, you're very kind. Thank you so much. I'm honored to support you, and I just really appreciate you being on the call tonight. Again, this is Congressman Gt Thompson, joined tonight by my Pennsylvania Governor candidate Charlie Giroux and Lieutenant Governor candidate Jeff Coleman. Now, if you'd like again to ask a question this evening, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. We've got a lot of interesting questions, so have some patience there. Somebody will hopefully get to screen you, and if they don't, well, there's an opportunity at the end of the call to leave your name, your phone number, and your question, and we will get back to you. And if not this evening, hopefully tomorrow. But to learn more about the Greater Tomorrow Commonwealth Pact, please visit our website at gtpacpa.com. gtpacpa.com. Now let's take some questions. I got a basic one teed up here. I appreciate that was submitted. Starting with Charlie. Charlie, what are your priorities as governor?
Well, there are a couple, GT. Pardon me, and I should do what I do on every phone call because my name is a little bit more difficult to pronounce than Coleman. It's Gerow, Gerow, and you pronounce it Giroux. But my priorities are a couple. One, getting election integrity returned, because if we can't trust the vote, we simply don't have any winners. And we have to make sure, GT, that every vote that's cast is properly cast, and every vote that's cast is properly counted. And if we can't do that, then we've got a real problem, because every fraudulent vote, just one, cancels out the vote of an honest, law-abiding citizen, and we simply cannot allow that. So I would move to repeal Act 77, for example. I would make sure that we have a Secretary of State. The governor in Pennsylvania appoints the Secretary of State, unlike most states where he or she is elected, that we'd have a Secretary of State who is both experienced in running elections, but also is fundamentally and unalterably committed to the rule of law. Somebody that isn't going to change the rules in the middle of the game, move the goalposts constantly, or tell one county you can have one set of rules and the county immediately next door you can have another. So I think that those things really will help to return trust in the integrity of our system.
All right, very good, Charlie. Thank you. Well, follow-up question to that came in is, those are great priorities, but exactly how would you, as just one individual, as governor, accomplish those priorities?
Well, to accomplish the priority I just spoke about, the governor has, as I said, the absolute ability to appoint the Secretary of State, something that's very unique. Only 9 states allow the governor to do that. The other part of it requires work with the legislature, and both you and Jeff have alluded to the fact that we have to have a governor who can actually govern, who can work with the General Assembly to get things done, who isn't a name caller and sarcastic and my way or the highway or just screaming and shouting all the time, but who can go in, work with the General Assembly to actually accomplish things, because I think the people of Pennsylvania are really crying out for that.
Oh, very good. Well, hey, thank you, Charlie. Jeff, a similar question that came in for you. Now you're running for Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor, and a lot of people are probably a little confused, maybe governor, lieutenant governor role. Can you tell us what the duties of this office are as lieutenant governor, and what are your priorities as the next lieutenant governor?
Well, that's a great question, GT, because you've got what the Constitution says, which are really two big responsibilities. One, which goes back to our Quaker tradition in the crime and punishment category, and that's the Board of Pardons. There was a notion at the founding that, prisons shouldn't just be warehouses, that there should be, for those who have paid their debt, who have demonstrated sufficient remorse, have a deep ties to community, often a church or a strong family, that maybe there should be a circumstance that they should be considered for a pardon or commutation. And so we have this process set up. But it's only as good as the values that drive the members of that commission, and that is chaired by the lieutenant governor. But the one that I'm really excited about is the one that perhaps might sound the blandest at the surface, but that is that being the president of the Senate. And the Senate and the House in Pennsylvania, like Congress, are guided by some pretty dusty rules that we don't have in places like social media, which require us to say gentleman and gentle lady and Mr. Speaker and use all of this arcane language. And I think the brilliance of that is that when people are frustrated and they think their government isn't listening, representative democracy really still works. Our constitutional republic works because the founders left us these sturdy environments where, regulated by rules, you could debate the most difficult issues of the day and do it in a way that didn't destroy the community, didn't consume all of our lives, and even issues as important as extending constitutional protections to preborn children, which all of us on this call agree is pretty important. These debates can be handled without the opposite side getting on the bus and leaving and not having the debate. So those are the two big ones. And then real quick, the lieutenant governor oversees the fire commissioner, which, as you know, GT, as a spokesman for volunteer fire companies, we're at a crisis point in volunteer fire and EMS. I'd serve on the local government commission, chair the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. So some pretty non-flowery, perhaps, commissions and boards, but when they don't function and a lieutenant governor is focused on other things, the job of good government doesn't happen.
All right. Well, thanks for that. Hey, we're going to go, this next one's going to be a live one, and we're going to go to Craig out in, let me see if I can press the button. There we go. In a great community, Kersey and Elk County. And Craig, why don't you go ahead? You have a question for Charlie and Jeff.
Okay. My concern was, that we get our oils from Saudi Arabia and even Russia when we have enough fuel in this country to supply the United States for almost 1,000 years, just in Pennsylvania alone. And my question is, why are the fuels being maintained for everybody to use?
Yeah, Greg, Craig, great question. I mean, God has blessed this Commonwealth. I mean, we originated the oil industry 1859, and quite frankly, between the Utica and the Marcellus, we've got yet. So let me pass that along to Charlie and Jeff to see what comments you might have on what the Keystone State would look like under a Giroux administration when it comes to energy.
Well, Craig, it's a great question, and simply stated, under a Giroux administration, the bywords would be drill, baby, drill, because the natural gas industry in particular, but oil as well as coal in Pennsylvania, are real blessings from God. And the safe and responsible development of them not only brings jobs to Pennsylvania, and these are high-paying jobs, it lowers energy costs for consumers, it provides the fuel for additional manufacturing in Pennsylvania, but you kind of hit at it at its core, Craig. It protects our national security, because buying our energy from people that hate us is the worst possible public policy. And so unleashing the development of the Marcellus Shale, the Utica Shale, and even the gas that's underneath that is at the top of the list, but so are all the other forms of energy. I'm a pro-Pennsylvania energy person and will be as governor. That's natural gas, it's oil, it's coal, it's nuclear, it's wind, it's solar, and any other form of energy that we can develop here. And let me just, before I turn it over to Jeff, say one other thing. The manufacturing component that comes because of our natural gas usage is seen especially in Beaver County, where they're building this cracker facility, which is going to allow the use of wet gas to produce plastic and all the goods that are made out of plastics. And as that facility, which has 6,000 construction jobs and billions, that's with a B, billions of dollars of investment, as that's coming to completion, around that are springing up all these little manufacturing companies that will be small businesses, job creators that are going to make things out of the plastics that are produced there. That's what we should be doing in addition to providing no-cost energy for consumers.
Well, I'm not going to add anything significant to what Charlie is saying. You're right. When you drive through Pennsylvania communities today, I was driving through Johnstown today, you saw one chapter in our history on the decline, but kind of new life springing up in and around those hulks of rusted old plants and creative uses for those spaces. But then traveling down to Beaver County, it is astounding just the sheer magnitude and size of the cracker plant. And the day that we were there a few weeks ago, there was a guy from Alaska who drove by who wanted to see it, because what is happening in Pennsylvania has global implications, and it does make Pennsylvania an energy leader. Where we can get this wrong is if we don't have a debate that is honest, that is fair, that presents all the facts. What I would love to have is a debate on energy in Pennsylvania that's in a concentrated period of time, declared perhaps by the governor. Maybe it's a special session to consider all of the ways to eliminate the barriers to energy production and exportation from Pennsylvania. But we have to tell the story of this chapter of our history. I want to be a support and a help to Charlie, whoever is the governor, to make sure that the debate happens in the right way and that we have honest facts on the table.
Very good, gentlemen. Hey, this next question is coming in from Jefferson County. Let me just lay a little groundwork, and then we're going to we'll be welcoming Tina to the call to ask her question. Pennsylvania, obviously, is known as the cradle of liberty, and overall, as governor, lieutenant governor, how would you, first of all, how would you assure that we, the people, are able to live with liberty and freedom? And we're going to build on that, actually, and I'm going to invite, here we go, Tina to join the call. Or Tina, welcome to the call this evening.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. My question is, I look forward to the Emergency Act being removed and our Constitution being put back in place. Because we can talk about any kind of subject that we want to, but as long as that is available, anybody can write any law they want and pass it. So I'm wondering how they felt about removing that. It doesn't just refer to COVID. It refers to our constitutional rights as citizens.
Well, Tina, I think you ask a great question, and certainly the edicts and mandates of Townhall often had very little to do with true public health and science, and a lot more to do with control. But the governor take away, with the stroke of a pen, what the previous governor created with the, and believe you me, I will. The individual liberties and personal freedoms of Pennsylvanians are, I believe, it's time for them to be restored with question. And I want you to know, Tina, that in addition to the two constitutional amendments that we all passed last to rein in the power of a governor in these so-called emergency declarations. I want to see a third. I will push the General Assembly as hard as the governor can push to give us a third Congress. You and me, GT and Jeff, and all the rest of us is for the people, right? To recall and remove from office any governor that oversteps any thinks he or can.
Okay, Charlie. I think Charlie's lines got garbled up just a little bit in the transmission there, but what Charlie is saying is doing something pretty extraordinary, which is bringing the powers of the governor back into its constitutional boundaries. One of the things I think is very hard is that when you're having these debates, Charlie often talks about this on the trail, is the lack of constitutional literacy. We just don't know what our rights are, and we don't know until they're taken away. And a trip to Philadelphia, for example, and if you haven't been there, there's the $60 million project that the American Bible Society just opened called the Faith and Liberty Discovery Center, which really connects our constitutional heritage and our origins and what happened at Independence Hall and the Declaration of Independence with our spiritual heritage. If we don't know the story of Pennsylvania and how extraordinary it was from William Penn forward, and don't know what our rights are enumerated and how they are applied to real life, there will be another COVID moment, and there will be another governor who will overstep those bounds. But we can't debate these issues if we don't have a basic understanding of where our rights come from and how they arrive. But great question, and I think Charlie has consistently had a great answer on this.
Oh, very good. Charlie, did you make it back on the line?
Yeah, I can you hear me now? I didn't know my line got garbled. And Tina, I apologize. My answer was unbelievably brilliant. I'm so sorry you missed it.
You're a good team. Hey, and Tina, thank you so much for being on the call tonight. I firmly believe that education is the pathway to opportunity, and that's when our founders who provided for education, they saw that was necessary for greater opportunity. Now, obviously, there's more than one pathway to success in life, and it's not all through a four-year college. And so this next caller that I recognize here seems to reflect that. I want to thank him for all the years he spent in the classroom. So this next question really has to do with assuring, how do we assure our kids are educated and maximize their success and opportunity? And so let me introduce and find here our next caller. My apologies here. This font is really small. So there it is. Hey, we're going to talk with David. Let me get David live on the line. David, thanks so much for being on the call. Why don't you go ahead with your question or your comments?
Okay, thank you for taking my call. I know that in today's society, education is becoming very important, and it's becoming a problem, with some of the woke stuff that's going on and all that. And I know that the governor doesn't have a whole lot of control over it, but he also has, a fair amount of input in it. And so I'd kind of like to know some of his views on our public education system, how he would feel about things like, well, number one, I think we need to bring discipline of some form back into the public schools. It's gone. And but to me, that's an important topic, is our education. And kind of going along with that, I guess, is the ideas of, for a long time there, our public education was pushing all the students to go toward college. And college is wonderful to a point, but it's also expensive, and we're losing the skills that we need, the skill sets that we need for everyday life. Not everybody can get a college degree and make a wonderful living where, we need the people in the trenches to do the manual work that needs done. So I'd like to know what your feeling is on this.
Today, a pretty broad one, but I'll try to answer it little by little and complete as because the one thing we know is that every child in Pennsylvania has a constitutional right to a thorough and efficient education. Have been let down by, particularly in our large cities, of our rural areas as well. So I am first a great believer in for that for a number of years. But when we get down to talk themselves, we've got a couple of basic problems. One, we've pushed to the sideline in the educational process. You have Biden out here the other week telling us that when kids show up in school, the government's in charge of them. Well, I reject that completely. I think parents are in charge. And by the way, if Joe Biden is so good at raising kids, how did Hunter turn out the way he did? I mean, we've got some real questions to ask in that regard. But on a more serious note, I think that the issue that you brought up with the indoctrination of our children, and that's what's going on in a lot of our schools, sadly, with the critical race theory and the 1619 movement and transgender sports and everything else. We've got to replace that with good old-fashioned basics, most notably teaching civics in our. My proposal is pretty simple. As a naturalized citizen of this country, and a very proud one at that, a legal immigrant who came here and became a naturalized citizen, I had to pass a citizenship test. I believe that every graduating senior from a Pennsylvania high school ought to pass a basic citizenship test as a prerequisite to getting a diploma, because that way we would know that they had read the Constitution, that they had at least some understanding of the rule of law, that they had a basic appreciation for our rich history and the traditions and values that have made our country so truly blessed and a beacon of hope to the whole world, and, despite our flaws, the greatest nation in the history of the world.
I'd echo just about everything you said, Charlie, and add that I think one of the concerns that I have when we have this debate is because all of our issues are nationalized now, that we're debating things in social media, we're debating, we're watching Fox News or CNN or whatever our favorite news source is. We forget that one of the principles of being a Republican is this notion of local control of education, that we want so many of these decisions to be handled and debated at the local level where citizens can be accountable, they can hold the teachers and school boards and administrators accountable, that when there's distance and there's a gap and these issues become decided by boards of education at the national or state level or secretaries of education, we're not having schools designed for the needs of local communities. I love the new emphasis on trades, on skill development, on being able to say that there are legitimate paths. I have 4 kids, and all of us, and my father-in-law said the other day, who was a laborer, worked his way up to overseeing a power plant and has retired. He said, hey, look, I don't want to offend you in any way, but Henry is so handy and gifted and able. I'm sure you want him to go to college, but I think he would excel in the trades. And I wanted him to know right away that that is absolutely a path we want for any of our kids that decide to go that way, that we don't determine their value by their degree, but how much they are committed to giving their lives away and loving others. And so I love how Charlie expressed his support for citizenship and making sure that we know where do our rights come from and what are our responsibilities as citizens. That's beautifully expressed.
Very good. Hey, Jeff, this next question came in specifically for you. Make sure I'm not mute. And let me bring it up here again. And it says, a key role for the lieutenant governor should be to communicate and support the governor's agenda among the state legislative branch. How are you qualified, and how would you accomplish this in the best possible effective way?
That's a great question, and it's important because The whole legislative agenda hinges on whether or not there is a cooperative relationship between the governor and the lieutenant governor. And the lieutenant governor has to understand that it's a subordinate role, that you are not the policy leader, that you are there to enact the policies of the governor. The job is to provide good counsel, private advice to the governor that makes sure that they're not embarrassed if there's a disagreement, certainly to object when there are moral or ethical or constitutional differences. But to pass an agenda, you have to have really two qualities. You've got to have humility, not run to the cameras, and you've got to have loyalty to the person who is at the top of the ticket and who leads the state. And the best lieutenant governors are people who coordinate the relationship between the House leaders, the Senate leaders, and the administration. Best example, I think, in modern times is Scranton Thornburg. Governor Thornburg was the governor. Bill Scranton's the lieutenant governor. There's a Netflix special right now that talks about 3 Mile Island, which happened within really 30 days of their administration taking office. You need no nonsense, level-headed, straight-talking, no drama when it comes to the office of lieutenant governor.
Very good. Hey, this next question is coming from a county that I'm going to be proud to represent, Snyder County. More importantly, it's coming from a woman who is one of my heroes with her occupation or profession as a registered nurse, having worked in healthcare for almost 30 years before coming to Congress and being licensed as a nursing home administrator. So I'm going to go on live here, Tiffany from Snyder County. Tiffany, you're on the line.
Yes, all I want is nobody can ever get the staffing requirement, which is always the state minimum. These facilities only staff the state minimum. The state minimum never changes. You cannot physically or legally do the amount of work they give you. And then the schedules are always fake. They're fraud. They put people's names there that are not scheduled. They were never scheduled. So when you get to work, you're doing 3 people's jobs because there is no LPN or aide showing up on the one floor. So the registered nurse has to do the 3 people's jobs because it's fake. They have to fill the holes on the schedule, you know what I mean, so they don't get fined. So they put anybody's name in there, fake names of people that are working somewhere else, you understand? So the state minimum has to change. I've written the Department of Labor and Department of Health. Nobody does anything. I've written to senators for Pennsylvania, whoever they were, different ones, whether Democrat or Republican. Nobody does nothing, and they never will. And that's why there's a shortage in nursing, because you're treated like dirt. That's all you are, is a number. You're not a human being. And if you drop dead from a heart attack, because you can't physically do all the work that there is. And then, like I worked night shift and got off at 7 for Easter Sunday. Nobody showed up till 10. Nobody answered the phone. I texted, help. I'm supposed to leave at 7. Nobody shows up to relieve you. That's not the first time in 20-plus years, and I've worked almost 300 different facilities. Nobody cares. Do you understand? Nobody comes in. Nobody cares. I fill in. I'm agency, but I've had regular jobs. Nobody comes to replace you. It's yeah. I can cry. I'm ready to go to Florida. Yeah. I already have my license there. Do you understand?
Yeah. Hey, Tiffany, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for your more than 2 decades of service in nursing. As someone, I cut my teeth working my way through school, working 11 to 7 on a nursing home. I know how hard you work. And I know that we are, Charlie, it is certainly a question, but a fair question, given the fact that the state establishes some minimum staffing levels when it comes to health care in certain settings. So we're going to turn that one over to you.
Well, and I want to thank Tiffany as well. And the dates right now, GT, are kind of running together for me, but I think we're still in National Nursing Week. Are we not? Or are we just past it today? So we want to honor and respect all those in the nursing profession. And yeah, it's not just the state minimums, but what she's pointing up is that there is actual fraud that's occurring in some of these facilities. And I think those things, GT, could be picked up in a performance audit, and they ought to be. So I would want to look very carefully at some of the things that she said are occurring at her facility and see why they're not being picked up in performance audits.
Look, the fatigue that nurses are experiencing is one of the primary reasons why there's such a high turnover. I think GT mentioned at the beginning that I grew up in the mission field in the Philippines, and I remember in the early 1980s that the newspapers in the Philippines were filled with advertisements from American hospitals that were deteriorating because of that first wave of nursing shortages. And we're almost at those proportions today. We have several close friends in our family who talk about the implications when safe staffing ratios aren't held to standard, and we have given hospitals and healthcare organizations a wide latitude to try to iron out these problems, but it's now becoming a health and safety issue, which has ripple effects up and down, which includes EMT and volunteer fire service. And there's a larger problem with staffing in healthcare and the minimum standard of care that you should expect from in a first world country in a modern state that I think the next governor will have the privilege of addressing, and will have to do it rather urgently.
Hello?
I'm talking.
I'm still here, everyone.
I lost you for a minute, GT. I'm back.
Well, I was on mute, and which I muted myself. That's a good sign, maybe. But yeah, this next question is tee up for both of you, and I'll introduce our person from Brockway in Jefferson County, and just a little bit, Renee will kind of ask the questions, but I'll tee this up a little bit. Having confidence in our election process is absolutely critical to our constitutional form of government. Governor Tom Wolf abused our election process in 2020 with unconstitutional dictates involving ballot deadlines, drop-off boxes, allowing third-party ballot harvesting, neglecting signature verification, just to mention a few abuses. So follow up with that. We do have a call, Renee from out in Jefferson County, and let me hit live. And Renee, you are on the line. Thanks for being on the call tonight.
Hi, my question was for all of you, and first and foremost, I just want to thank you all for the efforts you're making to try to turn this ship around for Pennsylvania and steer it into a better place, because we're really flailing here in the path that we're in. So first and foremost, I pray every day for our country and our state. But for all of you, all the efforts you're making are very important, and I want you to know that I'm sure it's a very thankless job, and I'm sure you get treated very poorly by people sometimes, but I want you to know, regardless of what's happening, I value and appreciate all of you. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the 2020 election, and if it were to be brought back to the attention of Pennsylvania, would you do anything in your power, if given the opportunity, to at least find out some more information on what exactly specifically took place during that election? And then a add-on to that question would also be, what is your stance on the ballots? What is your stance on paper ballots? What is your stance on mail-in ballots? What is your stance on voter ID? That is important to me, as I'm sure is every Pennsylvanian, and I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that. And I know the election has already passed, and I know we're in a new day and we're trying to move forward, and I respect that. But I'm curious to know what will be done to rectify the wrongs that were committed, that everyone knows were committed, that everyone's kind of dancing around right now. And I just was curious.
Renee, this Congressman GT, great question. And quite frankly, we're blessed. We have elections every year. So the next election is corner. It's a week from today. And then we will have at least 2 elections every year. So your question is very timely and very important. And I'm going to yield that over to Charlie and then and to Jeff. If any comments, go ahead, gentlemen.
Well, first, Renee, let me thank you for your prayers. And I mean that very sincerely, for your prayers for our state and for our country, but also for those of us that are out running for office, because we need them. And so I covet your prayers, and I hope that you'll continue to send them. The issues that you raise are very important. I spoke to them at the beginning of this call, but I'll say again that there's nothing that's more important than restoring election integrity, because if we don't have absolute certainty that the count is accurate and proper and that there's no fraud there, then we really don't have any winners. And so one of the things that I'm always kind of confounded by is the fact that there are those who oppose an audit. I'm in business. I run a small business. We get audited all the time. I don't really like it, but I've never hidden from it. Auditors come in. I lay out the books in front of them. I say, if there's anything else you need, please let me know. They make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. And the reason that I don't have any fear about it is we know we didn't do anything wrong. So the people that have great fear over audits have to be asked, what is it that you have to hide? You know, it's the old Shakespearean, methinks thou doth protest too much. So I think there ought to be audits, and I think they ought to be as full and complete as we possibly can do. And the other question you asked was about ballots. I said, again, at the beginning of this call, that I would immediately ask the General Assembly to put on my desk a bill repealing Act 77, which was on its face unconstitutional. So please don't accept the malarkey. And, you know, if I was in more rural Pennsylvania, GT, we might call it something else. But the malarkey that Act 77 was really okay, but that the judges and Tom Wolf changed it around. It was not. It was fundamentally flawed. Mike Kelly, Congressman Mike Kelly, one of GT's colleagues, brought the action, which we supported, and I helped to file the amicus briefs in that case, right after the November election, which would have declared Act 77 unconstitutional. And one of the biggest problems with Act 77 are these automatic, no excuse, quote unquote, mail-in ballots. I mean, the Carter Commission, of all people, warned us years ago of the potential for fraud when you have mail-in ballots. No excuse mail-in ballots. I should be more precise on that.
Well, Charlie was pretty eloquent in just understanding the roles of governor, proposing the policies and setting the agenda, and the lieutenant governor having the responsibility of acting on the agenda. The big broad principles for me are, yes, I think that voters need to have confidence that by a reasonable time, perhaps midnight, we know the results of an election. I think we have a reasoned consensus now that there should be an identification card when you walk into the polling place. We have a statewide consensus that Act 77 and all that it delivered really provides a roadmap to more confusion. And you can't police every single drop box. You don't have the money, the resources, the fail-proof technology to do that. What we do have is a system that for a very long time worked, which allowed for poll watchers and judges of elections and poll watchers from each party with an eye to preventing fraud. We know what human nature can do when given the right or the wrong circumstances. And so we have built in over the years a system of redundancies that allows people to have confidence, checking, double checking, Republican fact checkers and Democratic ones. And if we can return to that simple system, re-educate folks on what the election process does and what the expectation should be. And I think you can do it, by the way, without all of the noise from the national groups on both sides of this debate that are constantly sending mail and robocalls and stoking fears and raising money, I think we can have this debate in the legislature in a very rational and reasonable way, with the governor making very clear goals about what the expectations for elections are. You've got to have a governor, as Charlie outlined, who leads and is very clear about what the expectations are for election officials. And then guess what? The counties, local, make some of the big decisions on how to administer their elections.
All right, very good, gentlemen. We're going to go back to the phones, and we've got Ben from down in Selinsgrove, Snyder County, and Ben's going to be teeing up a question. It has to do with obviously one of those important principles that the Greater Tomorrow Commonwealth Pact has, and that is supporting small businesses. Ben, thanks so much for being on the call tonight.
Thank you, GT. Thank you, Charlie and Jeff. I have not met you, but I do know the other two gentlemen. Quick question, great format tonight, very informative. Great to hear the people around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania calling. We hit on energy a little bit earlier, but what about the process of improving the permitting process for businesses, particularly construction businesses, and also looking at the regulations that hamstring businesses in Pennsylvania, and also potential businesses that want to come to Pennsylvania?
Great question, Ben. And small business has really suffered, as you know, over the course of this pandemic. What Tom Wolf did to the small business community was devastating, and fully a third of our small businesses may not come back. And small business, as you know, is the great job creator in Pennsylvania. And as a small business person myself, I know what needs to be done to give the assistance to our small business community. They're not looking for handouts. They're simply looking for a level playing field and the opportunity to succeed. And that opportunity comes in two major ways. One is with fair taxation. We have the highest business taxes in the country on an annualized basis. Even Tom Wolf, in a fit of lucidity, said our business taxes are too high. So they have to be dramatically cut in order to make Pennsylvania competitive with the other states, but also with the other countries of the world, because we're one of the largest economies on the globe. Cutting the taxes on our businesses, the job creators, but also cutting taxes on the individuals, because as you know, with a small business, much of the tax is coming through directly to an individual taxpayer through K-1s or other mechanisms. So cutting taxes for individuals is equally important. But the other point that you raised about regulation is very, very important, because regulation is also a tax. The cost of complying with the regulations and regulatory process gets passed on to consumers. It's a tax. And so we've got to do two things. We've got to streamline the process so that DEP doesn't mean don't expect punctuality anymore, so that we can get things done in days and weeks rather than months and years. And two, so that the permitting process is not only expedited, but the regulatory process behind it is more collaborative than punitive, so that we don't have gotcha statutes, but rather have regulations that are sensible and that ultimately produce better results.
Well, amen, Charlie. What I'll say is that what was refreshing to hear about what Charlie just said is he just offered a governing philosophy. And I think what you have in most political campaigns today is kind of poll-driven responses to sometimes manufactured problems. And what you heard Charlie talk about was lower taxes, smaller government, limited government, responsibility on the part of businesses, regulatory agencies being cooperative, not being obstacles. And what you desperately need to have in this moment are leaders who govern with a worldview and a framework that, you know, when they're given the privilege of driving the car, they're not going to drive it over the cliff, because they have taken the temperature of the environment. And the contrast to what Charlie just said to some of the really below the belt negative ads that are 15 minutes of attacking all the opponents and then 15 minutes of saying something glowing about yourself, those 30-second ads further problems. What Charlie just did, which I support everything he said, was offer a conservative, center-right, pro-growth governing philosophy for Pennsylvania, and that's a very encouraging thing to hear when you're looking at who's the governor you're going to look to serve under.
All right. Well, we got a couple Second Amendment questions, so I'm going to combine some of those given the late hour we have here. And specifically, what is your stance on gun control? And let's add in another one there that including the support constitutional carry laws. And let's tee that up. Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I am a strong supporter of individual gun rights, always have been. I'm a life member of the NRA, a gun owner myself, and if folks really want to see how I was raised, they can go to my website, charlieforgovernor.com, and see a picture of my 98-year-old mother holding her AR-15, which a lot of folks have gotten a chuckle out of. But, all the candidates on the Republican side are going to say that they're for the Second Amendment, and I believe them. But I go a step further, and I ask folks to look at the Pennsylvania Constitution, which says in Article 1, Section 21, that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned. And what's particularly important about that, because it goes beyond the U.S. Constitution, is that it's a relatively modern version. One of the things that the anti-gun people say is, oh, well, the Second Amendment was written back in the 18th century, and they only had muskets and blah, blah, blah. Well, this was written in 1968. And so it's relatively modern, and the framer of the Constitution of 1968 knew exactly what they were doing, and they wanted to make sure that we had the broadest possible protection for law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms, because I've always believed, GT, that the best defense against bad people with guns is good people with guns. And so I support the open carry laws. I don't think you ought to have a permit in order to exercise a constitutional right.
I think the hour has come. Our 60 minutes is going by so quickly. I do want to say, if you're still on the line, stay on the line, and you should be able to leave a message at the end. And the question I want to ask is if you're willing to volunteer at the polls or between now and close of election next Tuesday for Charlie Giroux for governor, or Jeff Coleman for lieutenant governor. You stay on the line and leave your name, your cell phone number, contact information, and the campaigns will be getting back in touch with you. Charlie, we give you. Well, let me start with Jeff. Jeff, you want to just kind of do a real brief closing, and how can people get more information about your campaign?
Well, thank you, GT, and it's just been a privilege to be with you all tonight, and thank you, Charlie. And this campaign has taught me a lot, I think, about listening, about where Pennsylvania is hurting, and really it confirms everything I believed leaving Liberty University and going into the real world, that the answers aren't in government, they're in families, they're in churches, they're in our community organizations, and the more freedom we have to exercise our self-government, the happier we'll be, and whatever we can do to get those barriers to personal liberty and freedom and religious freedom out of the way, that's an administration I'd be proud to be a part of. My website is colemanforpa.com, colemanforpa.com, and chances are our No Drama Conservative Tour will be coming to a community near you pretty soon, but before the polls close on Tuesday. Thank you, GT.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. Charlie?
Well, GT, thank you so much. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your endorsement. Thank you for having Jeff and me on. Again, it's G-E-R-O-W, because I know it's a difficult name to pronounce sometimes. Folks can get in touch with me via my website, which is charlieforgovernor.com, charlieforgovernor.com. And folks should feel free to call me personally. My cell number is 717-877-8194, 717-877-8194. And I'm very proud to be the candidate that's not shooting out 30-second attack ads, but rather is talking about our future, restoring our liberties and our freedoms, and making Pennsylvania a truly great place again. And I just want to add one final sentence. I was with my 98-year-old mom a couple of few days ago, and she showed me a little handmade sign that she has that says, Jeff Coleman for Lieutenant Governor. So I hope, Jeff, that your mom's handwriting is as good as mine.
Oh, that's beautiful.
All right. Well, gentlemen, once again, I want to thank everybody for participating in tonight's call. Again, this call was provided by the Greater Tomorrow Commonwealth PAC. That's the GT Commonwealth PAC. And again, our goal is to support state and local candidates that, that support the principles that this PAC was founded on, as pro-life, pro-family, pro-agriculture, pro-energy, pro-small business, really all the things that God has blessed us with. So if you want to learn more about the Greater Tomorrow Commonwealth PAC, just go to gtpacpa.com, and you can get information there on how to support those types of candidates. Certainly encourage you to, I'm just honored to give you all, everyone on the call, recommendation to, when you go to vote Charlie Giroux for governor, Pennsylvania governor, and Jeff Coleman for Pennsylvania lieutenant governor, for all the reasons we've talked about tonight. And feel free to share that information with your friends, your neighbors, your in-laws. Just thank you so much. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everyone have a great evening, and God bless.
Thank you, GT.
Thanks, Chief. Good night.